According to the Old Testament, after God had freed the Israelites from their slavery in Egypt, they spent 40 years wandering in the desert. Now, the Israelites would have been an unusual desert community. To explain why, I want to read out of the book of Exodus, chapter 12. And first, I'm going to read verses 37 and 38. It says, "And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children." So of the adults, we'll presume when it says men, it means adults. Of the adults, there were 600,000, more than 500,000 people. Then there were children. Now, in the average community, children outnumber adults. So, in this case, you have well over 1,000,000 Hebrews. In verse 38, it says, "And a mixed multitude went up also with them." Now, it doesn't give any numbers, but presumably a mixed multitude would include a lot of people. So you have, I don't know, we could estimate a couple of million people in this group. "And they had flocks and herds and very much cattle." Now, I'm going to go back and read before they left from verses 35 and 36. It says, "And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians." Now, the reason I'm discussing this is because the average desert community consists not of millions of people, but of perhaps dozens of people. Now, they may have occasional gatherings where they add up to hundreds or even thousands, but as a normal daily occurrence, you're not going to find numbers in the millions in a desert community, simply because the desert can't support that. Now, if you conclude that the Israelites were supported by divine intervention, then you can explain, well, that's how the Israelites were able to survive there, and that's not the point of this video. Anyway, I wanted to establish you have millions of people with lots of stuff, because desert communities don't generally have that much stuff either. They have to be able to carry everything they have. So you have a very large group of people with a lot of stuff. Over the course of 40 years, a large portion of those people are going to die. Die of natural causes, die because, according to the Bible, they kept slaughtering each other. They kept displeasing God, and God would slaughter them. They're going to be butchering animals. They're going to be sacrificing animals. They're going to be leaving objects behind. Even in historic and prehistoric times, people were great producers of garbage. So for 40 years, you have hundreds of thousands of people dying and their carcasses being left. Quite possibly millions of animals. Lots of other garbage and artifacts being left in the desert. The desert is a great preserver of artifacts. So one would expect that over the last 150 years, in which modern archaeologists have been searching the desert, looking for these artifacts, you would expect they would have been found. Yet, as far as I'm aware, no substantial evidence of such an incredibly large number of people has ever been found, even though many of the ones looking for the evidence are Bible believers themselves who have been attempting to validate the Exodus account. Now, the fact that no evidence or little evidence has been found isn't in itself conclusive. As they say, an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. But there is evidence as to the origins of the people of Israel. Specifically, in the Bible, it gives accounts of battles that took place in the land of Canaan as the Israelites took the land away from Canaanites. In some of the cities it mentions, there is archaeological evidence of fighting. But it's interesting evidence because it doesn't indicate warfare. What people may not realize is that there are different kinds of violence, and they leave behind different kinds of evidence. In warfare, you tend to find discarded weapons, arrow tips, spear tips, broken sword blades. Even though a city may be cleaned up, some of those artifacts will be left behind to be found by later archaeologists. You also tend to find large numbers of casualties, mass graves of people who died violent deaths. neither one of these scenarios seems to be the case in the history of Canaan. In fact, the violence seems to have been primarily directed at property. It would seem that, rather than warfare, it's evidence of internal revolution, rioting, and strife. Another piece of evidence is found in the language of the Hebrews. It seems to be closely related to that of the Canaanites. Their style of dress seems to be the same. The men of Canaan were bearded, as the Israelites were. The pottery of Israel is not like that used by the common people of Egypt, but is identical to that of the common people of Canaan. In some of the cities in which the Bible says there was violence, archaeological evidence says there was continuous inhabitation without violence. It would seem instead that there was a gradual change from a polytheistic culture to a monotheistic culture. So when you examine the lack of evidence for the Exodus account establishing the nation of Israel, and the abundant evidence for the Israelites, in fact, being Canaanites, what does your critical thinking tell you?